Today is going to be a fun tutorial using a new transfer, blending, painting with pigments, and using lots of gold wax.
All these bananas on my birthday cake remind me that I'm young. I feel it just like yesterday, those days out in the sun.
Today, I am going to talk about this new transfer from IOD. It is called Bungalow. I think it should be called Jungle Fever because it's wild. There's tigers on it. I love it because I was a wild child. Off all the hardware and the molds, and now we're ready for round 3 of this dresser. I think this time it's going to be good. This dresser had already been painted 3 times, but you know, they say 3rd time's a charm, so I was going with a pink blended look. I wanted to put darker pink on the edges and get lighter as I worked my way toward the middle. So I am using Cowgirl Coral, Kissing Booth, Petticoat Pink, probably a little bit of yellow, and a flat paddle brush, and I am blending the colors with a spray bottle using separate brushes for each color and a neutral brush to blend the 2 colors together. When you first start off, too much paint on your brush can get into the light colors, so I'm using a paper towel to wipe back the excess. My mom was mostly serious. My parents were very strict. They never went out. They didn't go party or anything like that. When they did go out and we got a babysitter, it was a huge deal. One day my mom comes up to me and she says, "Debbie, you're gonna have a babysitter, but don't worry." I think she felt guilty for leaving us. She told me how she had games for us laid out, we could do crafts, and she even got us a special snack. I was super excited about this. We were not allowed to eat sugar. Very rare that we ever got any special treats. Whenever I go to apply my transfers, I always make a mental note of where the hardware is going to go back on, because I don't want to put a knob right over the face of the parrot or any special element in the transfer. In most cases, you want to apply a sealer before you rub on the transfer. This will help the transfer glide on easily. I usually don't do this. It's a little bit harder to put the transfer on, but I like to apply wax and I like to blend paint right over the top of the transfer because I never know when I'm going to be finished with the blending. So what I like to do with DIY paint is I wait 24 hours before rubbing on that transfer, and that usually works, and I don't have to worry about the paint pulling up as I rub the transfer on. You want to do this at your own risk, but this works most of the time for me, and I really like the options of not having to put down a sealer first. I found this image on Pinterest, and I like the way the leaves are dripping down from the top and leaving negative space at the bottom. This is the composition that I am trying to recreate. I'm giving you a close-up of some of the transfer that was not rubbing off easily. I think this is because this piece had been waxed previously, and so the transfer was just not gliding on. So what you're seeing me do here is apply the liquid patina. I let that dry overnight, and then I came back with more transfers, and they went on a lot easier. But I only put the liquid patina in the places where I thought the transfers were going to go, and I left a lot of it unsealed so that I could continue to blend. So my parents get ready to go to Bible study. I was stoked. I was pumped. The babysitter shows up. We wave goodbye to my parents. I am ready to get out all the stuff. Then the babysitter gets on the phone. This was the 70s, so it was one of those rotary phones. I think it was like avocado green, and the cord stretched all the way into the other room, into our den. And she goes in there and she just totally never comes back. When are you gonna get off the phone? She shushed us. She finally gets off the phone, and I am ready to get out the snacks. She tells us that it's our bedtime already. It was like only 8 o'clock, and we could have totally stayed up for another hour, and we didn't even get to eat the treats.
My best advice for creating interesting composition with transfers is to leave a lot of negative space so that all the intricate details will stand out. Whenever I set out to do this, I cut the transfers apart a lot. I cut them in little tiny pieces so that I can puzzle piece them back together and make them fit my furniture piece and the composition that I have in mind.
She just put us to bed and said it was too late. And then the next day, I tell my mom, the babysitter didn't let us do anything, and we didn't even get to eat the carob chocolate bar that you got for us, sweetened with honey. I asked her if I could have it for a snack. I'm sorry, honey, but it looks like the babysitter ate it. I was furious.
You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane. And it's bubbling over like a sweet champagne. You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain.
Now I am creating some highlights with diluted white swan. I am painting right over the transfer, and then I'm wiping back the excess with a damp cloth.
Sometimes you cry your big blue eyes for no discernible reason. Your point of view, it comes and goes like the changing of the seasons. You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy.
You would imagine my surprise when my mom tells me that that same babysitter is coming back again. My mom assured me that she would talk to the babysitter and not to worry. The babysitter shows up again. As soon as my parents leave, she gets right back on the phone.
I am using the pigment powders to add more depth and shadows to the edges. You just dip your brush in water and then dip it in the pigment powder and start blending. They are super easy to blend. You can blend them right over the top of the transfers like I'm doing here, and then take a damp rag to wipe back the excess.
I was not about to let her get away with this again. But after 20 minutes, I come up with a plan, and I go to my little sister Danielle. I pull her aside. She is supposed to be watching us. Our parents are paying her to make sure that we are safe, and she is not doing her job. We need to teach her a lesson. I sneak into the kitchen right under the babysitter's nose. She is just around the corner, and I pull out a steak knife. I open the refrigerator door, and I get out the ketchup.
This dresser was pretty humble and basic, and I wanted to give it a glamorous element. So I am dusting the acanthus scroll mold, and I'm pressing in the paper clay so that I can give it a bunch of fancy scroll work at the bottom and the top of the dresser. I wait until the paper clay is completely dry. I let it dry overnight, and now I'm going over the molds with red paint. I'm doing this because I'm going to put gold wax on the top, and if you apply red paint under gold wax, it makes the gold even more gold and glamorous and super shiny. So that is what I'm doing here.
I go back down the hallway and I tell my sister, when I say go, I want you to run into the den screaming that I am hurt. I get out the ketchup, put some right on my neck, and I get the sharp knife and I lay down on the orange 70s shag carpet and I plant my face into the carpet because I don't want to burst into laughter. And then I tell my sister, okay, go.
Find a little spot in the shade, pink lemonade, pink lemonade. Everything is going my way, pink lemonade, pink lemonade.
I take a sip and I'm in heaven. The dopamine is dripping on my brain. Imagination's at 11. Reality is gonna fade away.
I went over all of my red paint with gold wax, and then I used a wet brush, dipping in the pigment powder and going back in to provide more shading and more depth. I like to think of the pigment powders like powdered sugar on a donut. I wait until I'm all done blending with the paint, and I use the powders last so that the heavily pigmented paint doesn't suck up the pigment powder. If you wait for DIY paint to dry completely, it dries really chalky and porous, so that when you dip your wet brush in the pigment powder and then onto DIY paint before it's been sealed, it will absorb it, kind of like a sponge.
Go. Danielle takes off running. She is really good at drama. Debbie is hurt. Debbie is hurt. I'm like shaking, trying not to laugh. And then the babysitter comes in. I can't see her, but I hear her going, oh no, oh no. I bust out laughing and I sit up and she is angry. I am gonna tell your parents.
I was younger, so I don't remember it as clearly as Debbie does. And she was the mastermind behind it all. But what I do remember vaguely is being more afraid of Debi than the babysitter. So when she told me what to do and she told me to make sure that I was serious, I guess I went into actress mode. I just remember it was real. It was real to me. And when it felt real and I felt like I was actually experiencing Debbie's danger, I remember running down the hallway. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, Debbie!
I was taken by the moon, looking down on everything I never knew.
This is our white aging dust, and I am using it just like the pigment powders. I am getting my brush wet, using water to spray it, and blending it in the middle of the dresser just to add some more contrast and some more highlights. I'm keeping those highlights in the middle of the dresser and all of the shadows towards the edges.
I am gonna tell your parents. Oh no, you're not. You know why? My parents are paying you to make sure that we don't get into trouble. And if you were watching us, that I would have never been able to get that steak knife and the ketchup. You are not doing your job. So I don't think you're gonna tell them. The babysitter puts us to bed again early. I was scared. I was worried that she was gonna tell on us. So I stayed up that night just waiting for my parents to come home.
Static when I try to speak. Not an addict, I just need some sleep.
Before I finished this, there were a couple of things that I needed to fix. This dresser came with that Batman looking hardware, and I don't like that. So I made some molds and I glued them to the middle of the hardware, and now I am covering up what I like to call panty lines. They are markings from previous molds, and I wanted to cover them up. So with DIY paint, if you let it sit out, it starts to turn back into clay because it is made mostly of clay. So after I covered up those panty lines, I smeared some more paint on the edges and other areas so that it wouldn't look weird, so that it all looked kind of like the whole dresser was texturized. And now I'm blending in those texturized spots with more paint.
And a few hours later, I hear the keys in the door. I hear my parents coming in. I get up and I tiptoe into the hallway to eavesdrop and see what's gonna happen. My dad is like, "How were the girls tonight?" "Oh, they were great." And I was like, phew.
Your pot of tea, 2 sugars, milk and honey, please, Sir Windsor. Drink his cup like this most every day. Book of pages, nameless, sick and bound and spoiled and blameless. Ready for my thoughts in small cachet. All the horns and sound of music, soon I'll have a song we'll use it. Every word till now has been in vain.
I used a sanding sponge to bring out all that texture that I created, and I'm repeating some of the details on the top of the dresser that I put on the front of the dresser.
I never told my parents about this until I was an adult. And when I told my mom said, "No wonder I could never get that babysitter to come back." That's the end of the story.
I've been through this a million times. Now I'm starting to lose my mind. Shot like a rocket to his level.
The last thing to do is seal the entire piece with clear wax. Let the wax dry for 24 hours and buff it with a soft cloth.
What if we're living in a fantasy? Some world that I could only dream. New colors bursting out of every seam. A hidden land for you and me.
To find DIY paint in your area or to sell it in your store, click the link below. And to find all the products used in this video, click the link below. Thanks for watching.
The flowers talk and trees can walk around. Sometimes our feet float off the ground. Are we living in a fantasy? Are we living in a fantasy? I think we're living in a fantasy. And I don't